The man who wrote Whole Lotta Love wasn't in Led Zeppelin. He was a 6'5" songwriter from Vicksburg, Mississippi, who sold that song and 500 others for $30 each to a record label on the south side of Chicago. He didn't know he was supposed to own it. By the time he found out, the song had made millions for other people. His name was Willie Dixon. You probably know the songs better than the name. That's the whole problem.
Chess Records, 1950 to 1965. Leonard and Phil Chess run the label. Willie Dixon writes the songs, plays bass on the sessions, produces the records, scouts the talent, and, for a period, sweeps the floor. He is the most important person in the building. He is paid accordingly badly. Dixon wrote more or co-wrote 500 songs during his time at Chess. He wrote Little Red Rooster for Howlin' Wolf, My Babe for Little Walter, I Just Want to Make Love to You for Muddy Waters, Backdoor Man for Wolf Again, Wang Dang Doodle for Coco Taylor, Spoonful, I Ain't Superstitious, You Shook Me, I Can't Quit You Baby. He sold some of them for as little as $30. He received session fees. He received no meaningful share of what those songs eventually earned. In 1984, his autobiography, he wrote, I call it swindling, but most people call it smart business when you can take advantage of someone who doesn't know no better. I didn't know anything about copyright laws or anything like that. Chess would always find one way or the other to take my money. In 1969, Leonard Chess sold the label for $6.5 million. Willie Dixon was not a wealthy man. In 1977, Dixon and Muddy Waters sued Arc Music, the publishing arm that held their songs, for unpaid royalties. It was the first time either man had formally tried to reclaim what was theirs. By then, the songs had been circling the globe for 20 years, and the British had already found them.
Forest, Mississippi, 1905. Arthur Crudup starts playing guitar in his 30s. He moves to Chicago, records for RCA's Bluebird label, and signs with a manager named Lester Melrose. Melrose has a standard position on artists and contracts. He stated it plainly years later. I wouldn't record anybody unless he signed all his rights in those tunes over to me. Crudup recorded 80 songs between 1941 and 1956. He held the rights to none of them. Sun Studio, Memphis, July 5, 1954. Elvis Presley is on a break during a recording session that isn't going anywhere. He picks up his guitar and starts playing a blues song he heard years before down in Tupelo, just fooling around. The producer, Sam Phillips, stops everything. The song is Arthur Crudup's That's All Right. Crudup recorded it in 1946. It was Presley's debut single. Some critics call it the first rock and roll record. Most of the people who call it that have never heard Crudup's version. Crudup was credited on the label of Presley's single. His name was there. What wasn't there was money. His original manager had assigned all publishing rights. The royalties that should have flowed from Presley's version, which became the best-selling single on the Sun label, went elsewhere. In the early 1960s, Crudup received a royalty check. It was for $1,600. In 1971, Downbeat magazine estimated that Crudup should have earned $250,000 from That's All Right and My Baby Left Me alone. That's roughly $2 million in today's money. In 1972, a formal out-of-court settlement of $60,000 in back royalties was negotiated and agreed to. The check was never written. Elvis Presley told the Charlotte Observer in 1956, "Down in Tupelo, Mississippi, I used to hear old Arthur Crudup bang his box the way I do now. I said if I ever got to the place I could feel all old Arthur felt, I'd be a music man like nobody ever saw." Arthur Crudup died in 1974. He was working on a farm on Virginia's eastern shore, picking cucumbers and tomatoes, wearing coveralls, leading a crew. His granddaughter, decades later, They took so much more than just money. They left him with all of the burdens of a poor black man. He felt it. They just didn't pay him for it.
August 1952. A band leader named Johnny Otis brings two teenage songwriters to meet Willie Mae Thornton. Their names are Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller. They hear Thornton sing. They write Hound Dog in 15 minutes. Thornton records it. It goes to #1 on the R&B chart and stays there for 7 weeks. It sells somewhere between 500,000 and 750,000 copies. It is a genuine, documented hit. Willie Mae Thornton received $500. She never saw another royalty check. Lieber and Stoller received an advance of $1,200. The check bounced. The person who made money from Hound Dog in 1952 was Don Roby, owner of Peacock Records, the label Thornton had signed to under an exclusive 5-year contract. Then, Elvis covered it. July 1956. His version sells 10 million copies globally. It is #1 simultaneously on the pop, country, and R&B charts. It stays at the top for 11 weeks, a record that stands for 36 years. Lieber and Stoller finally receive royalties. They occasionally send Thornton money from their own pockets. For the rest of her life, Willie Mae Thornton told anyone who would listen that Elvis got rich on her song. Stoller, decades later, acknowledged it plainly. That's true of not only Big Mama, but of many black performers and songwriters. She was right. And she was right about something else, too. Something the music industry had already demonstrated with Crudup and would demonstrate again with Dixon, and again until the pattern was so established it barely registered as news. Credit and compensation are not the same thing. The name on the label means nothing without a check behind it. And for a particular generation of black blues artists, the name was often the only thing they kept. 1962. The American Folk Blues Festival tours Europe. Howlin' Wolf, Sonny Boy Williamson, Willie Dixon, 3 of the architects of Chicago blues, sitting on a sofa in Giorgio Gamelski's Crawdaddy Club in London. The Rolling Stones are in the room. So are the Yardbirds. So were a generation of young British musicians who have been listening to Chess Records imports and trying to understand how the music works. Dixon, characteristically generous, is handing out songs. He described it later. I left lots of tapes when I was over there. I told them anybody who wanted to could go and make a blues song. That's how the Rolling Stones and the Yardbirds got their songs. He meant it as generosity. He was spreading the music, the way the music had always spread, from player to player, from town to town, from generation to generation. That was the tradition. That was how it worked. What he didn't account for was the machinery waiting on the other side of the transaction, the recording contracts, the publishing deals, the attorneys. In the oral tradition Dixon grew up in, you shared music because music was meant to be shared. What happened next was something else. Led Zeppelin formed in 1968. Over the next 7 years, they released 8 studio albums and became one of the highest-grossing acts in recording history. Their sound was built in measurable and documented ways on the Chess Records catalog. On the songs Willie Dixon wrote for $30 each on the south side of Chicago. Here is the ledger. Whole Lotta Love, the opening track of Led Zeppelin II, 1969. Credited to Page, Jones, and Bonham. The song's lyrical structure and melody derive directly from Dixon's You Need Love, recorded by Muddy Waters in 1962. Dixon didn't know about it until his daughter played it to him. He sued in 1985. The case settled out of court in 1987. Dixon is now credited. He was 72 years old when the lawsuit resolved. Bring It On Home. Same album, same year. Credited solely to Page and Plant. The song reproduces the opening and closing of Sonny Boy Williamson's 1963 recording, written by Dixon, almost note for note. Arc Music sued in 1972. Settled out of court. Dixon added to the credits. Jimmy Page's explanation: there's only a tiny bit taken from Sonny Boy Williamson's version.
We threw that in as a tribute. The tiny bit was the entire frame of the song. Lemon Song. Early set lists called it Killing Floor, Howlin' Wolf's 1965 recording. By the time it appeared on Led Zeppelin II, it had a new name and new credits. Wolf's estate was added after the 1972 Ark Music settlement. The song also draws on Robert Johnson's Traveling Riverside Blues from 1937. Johnson was dead since 1938. There was no estate to sue. How Many More Times? Led Zeppelin I, 1969. Credited to Page, Jones, and Bonham. The song shares extensive lyrics with Wolf's How Many More Years, recorded for Chess in 1951. Chester Burnett, Howlin' Wolf, was added to the credits in 1993, 24 years after the album was released. In My Time of Dying. Physical Graffiti, 1975, 11 minutes long, credited solely to Page, Plant, Jones, and Bonham. The song traces to Blind Willie Johnson, who recorded it in 1927. Bob Dylan covered it in 1962. By 1975, it was public domain. There was no legal obligation to credit anyone. No credit was given. Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. Led Zeppelin I, labeled on the album as a traditional folk song. It was not. It was written by a singer-songwriter named Anne Brendan in the late 1950s. Zeppelin almost certainly encountered it through Joan Baez's 1962 recording, which also labeled it traditional. Brendan was not credited until the 1990s. 6 albums, 6 entries, 1 pattern.
Not every act of erasure required a lawsuit. Some of them happened through sheer commercial force. Robert Johnson recorded Crossroad Blues in November 1936. One take in a hotel room in San Antonio, Mississippi. Released as a single in 1937, heard almost exclusively in the Mississippi Delta. Johnson died in 1938. He was 27. The cause of his death was never formally established. Eric Clapton and Cream recorded Crossroads live at the Fillmore Auditorium in San Francisco in March 1968. It became one of the defining guitar performances in rock history. Clapton credited Johnson. The attribution was there. But here is what attribution looks like in practice. Johnson's recording has been heard by a fraction of 1% of the people who know Cream's version. The Crossroads in Clarksdale, Mississippi, the intersection of Highways 61 and 49, has a monument to the myth of Robert Johnson. The monument references the legend. Most visitors learned the legend from a rock song recorded 30 years after Johnson died. Willie Dixon's Spoonful runs deeper. Papa Charlie Jackson recorded All I Want Is a Spoonful in 1925. Charlie Patton adapted it. Dixon wrote the modern version for Howlin' Wolf, who recorded it for Chess in 1960. Cream covered it on their debut album in 1966. The lineage runs 40 years and 5 artists. Almost none of it is known outside academic blues circles. Then there is Memphis Minnie. She and Kansas Joe McCoy recorded When the Levee Breaks in June 1929, 6 months after the Great Mississippi Flood of 1927, which had destroyed the Delta and displaced hundreds of thousands of people. They wrote the song about what they saw, about what happened to their world. Led Zeppelin recorded their version in 1971, with John Bonham's drums set up in the stairwell of a country house in Hampshire to capture the reverb. It is now one of the most recognizable drum recordings in history. It has been sampled, studied, and replicated by engineers for 50 years. Memphis Minnie is credited on the track. She died in 1973 in a nursing home in Memphis. She received nothing from the Zeppelin recording. The original still exists. It is 4 minutes long, recorded on a 78 in a studio in New York, and sounds like 1929 because it is 1929. Every year, a few more people find it. Most of them find it because they already knew the Zeppelin version and went looking. Credit was given. The original was still buried. Both things are true simultaneously.
By the early 1980s, Willie Dixon had spent 30 years watching his songs become other people's legacies. He had sued Chess's publishing arm, he had settled with Led Zeppelin, he had watched Little Red Rooster go to #1 in Britain without a meaningful share of what it earned. He had watched Whole Lotta Love become one of the most played rock songs in history and not known about it for 16 years. What he did with that experience is the part of the story that doesn't fit the standard narrative. He founded Blues Heaven, a nonprofit organization headquartered eventually at 2120 South Michigan Avenue, the old Chess Records building. Its mission? To help blues musicians obtain what was rightfully theirs, to educate the next generation of artists about copyright, about publishing, about the contracts they would be asked to sign, to preserve the music, to protect the people who made it. Dixon's grandson, Keith, who now runs the foundation, "My grandfather never got what he was entitled to." He says it without bitterness. It is simply a fact, the way the address is a fact, the way the music is a fact. Willie Dixon died on January 29, 1992 in Burbank, California. He had received a Grammy for Best Traditional Blues Recording in 1989. He had been inducted into the Blues Hall of Fame, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the Songwriters Hall of Fame. He was not wealthy. In 1993, his widow, Marie Dixon, purchased the building at 2120 South Michigan Avenue, the building where Leonard Chess had run his label, the building where Dixon had written songs in bathrooms and swept floors and played bass on sessions that would generate millions for other people. The deed is in her name. The Chess family has no involvement. Dixon wrote in his autobiography, "The blues are the roots and the other musics are the fruits. It's better keeping the roots alive because it means better fruits from now on. The blues are the roots of all American music. As long as American music survives, so will the blues." He was right about the music. It survived everything: the contracts, the litigation, the commercial erasure, the decades of other people's names on the credits. The songs are still being played. They will be played after everyone in this video is gone. What didn't survive for the most of the people in this script was financial security, recognition in their lifetimes, the ordinary dignity of being known as the person who made the thing that made the world different.
Every song in this script is still being played somewhere right now. On streaming platforms, in films, in guitar stores where teenagers learn their first riffs without knowing where the riff came from, in commercials, in wedding bands, in stadiums. The music never went away. What went away were the names attached to it. The man in the Chess Records bathroom in 1954 handing over a song for $30. The woman who got a $500 check and called it her royalties for life. The piano player who co-wrote the vocabulary of rock and roll and drove a bus in St. Louis for 20 years while the songs made other people famous. The man who grew up in Forest, Mississippi and wrote the song that launched the career of the most famous entertainer of the 20th century and died in a field. The music was kept alive. The people who made it were not always extended the same courtesy. Marie Dixon bought the building. That's as close as this story gets to justice. It's closer than most.